I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story, where I consult, teach, coach, and speak on the applied science and bewitchery of brand and business storytelling, so that you can clarify your story to amplify your impact and simplify your life.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture. I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands. People buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
What if you were raised in a missionary family, tending to the needs of a community in a third world country, personally doing without as you helped others get more out of life? But then your world is turned upside down when you return to the States in high school, put yourself through college, and try to adapt to surviving in our competitive dog-eat-dog business culture. You're trying to launch your career, and even though your parents taught you selfless service, you become a ruthless cutthroat to carve out your rightful stake at all costs in one of the most merciless industries in America, commercial real estate. But your aggression, while it builds your client list, costs you colleagues, friendships, your health, and even critically impacts your family. That's the journey you are about to go on with one of the most fascinating guests we featured here on The Business of Story. Jonathan Kaiser, author of the brand new book, You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win, shares his disruptive approach to selfless service that has helped him build Arizona's largest commercial real estate brokerage firm and one of the fastest growing in the country by going back to his moral roots of placing people first. But not until after he had to experience the underhanded underbelly of his career. Jonathan proves that you can change your story from marauding capitalist to an enterprising miracle worker of sorts by changing your myth of scarcity into an epic narrative of abundance. Even if you don't dwell in the dark arts of me first management, you will learn a great deal from Jonathan and his journey while meeting a conscious capitalist who now places people before profits. Buckle up, because you are in for quite a ride. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bark.
I've been really looking forward to this conversation for a couple of weeks. And the reason being is I moved down to Phoenix, Arizona in 1985 precisely because when I graduated from Washington State University, there were no jobs in Seattle. It was going through its recession. And I came down here because there were lots of jobs in the desert Southwest, Phoenix, Scottsdale, primarily because of commercial real estate. Now, got down here and got in the advertising marketing world, and we had some commercial real estate clients. And I never, ever understood or appreciated the shark tank that commercial real estate is until I got here.
Yeah.
I mean, it blew me away. So when I heard your story, we met a few years ago when you were just starting Kaiser, and you came out with your first book that you self-published, Disruptive. You had a very fascinating story to me because of your backstory, which is decidedly not dog commercial real estate. So on today's show, take us to your upbringing and then how you found yourself to be one of the most aggressive commercial real estate dudes in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona, and how then your life turned into Selfless Service and the company you've built around that.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thanks for having me on. You have a great podcast, and I think the message that you're trying to take to the world and teaching people how to really articulate their stories effectively is much needed.
Well, thank you.
So I enjoy it. Well, like you mentioned, I've had a very unusual upbringing. I have a legacy of service that goes back multiple generations. My grandfather started 2 churches on the Native American reservation, the Apache Indian reservation here in Arizona. That's how my mother got to Arizona. He translated the Bible into Apache with a team. And my mom's twin, now I was just at a family reunion this last weekend, and I got to spend some time with
You said you had about 80 people in town.
About 80 people at my house. It was
cool.
Both Saturday and Sunday. It was amazing. But yeah, I'm a little tired from it. But it was so neat to hear. They have now, my mom's twin started a ministry that now has 900 churches and is the largest Christian missionary organization in all of South America. So I was raised with this idea of success through service. I was raised with this idea of helping other people. And when I was a kid, my parents picked me up and took me off to Papua New Guinea, where we lived out in the middle of nowhere.
How old were you?
I was age 7 when we went.
7. Papua New Guinea.
So pretty formative years, very unique culture. It was about 20 years out of the Stone Age. And my dad started a pastor's training program so that the local pastors could become self-sufficient. And I was there till I was 11. My grandfather died, so we came back to the States. And I had no concept, Park, of wealth or poor until I got back. Because there, everybody's poor. And so when I came back from Papua New Guinea to the States, all of a sudden I had this rude awakening that everybody else had stuff that I wish I had. And they had cool clothes and they had toys and they had all these things. And here I was, a broke missionary kid living out of the donation crate. And deep within my psyche at that point, like that really affected me. And I decided at an early age, I didn't want to be poor. And to me, this idea of selflessly serving others, whether it be religious or not, carried with me that, well, if you're going to serve other people, that means you're not serving yourself. And so you're going to be poor all the time. And my parents would tell me like, well, yeah, but you get all the benefits. And I'm like, I don't want the other benefits. I want the financial benefits. And so
you wanted a bike, I think, in your book
man.
at one time. Was that when you were in Papua New Guinea?
That was when I was in Papua New Guinea.
Tell us the bike story.
Sure. So there was 2 things I wanted in Papua New Guinea. One was bubble gum. For whatever reason, we couldn't get bubble gum. And I was a kid that was for whatever reason, obsessed with the idea of bubble gum. I would have dreams about bubble gum. I would wake up crying in the middle of the night, wishing I had bubble gum. And part of it was I had a lot of cavities, so my parents didn't want to give it to me. I learned that later. But part of it too was that we just didn't have access to that kind of stuff for the most part. The bike story is I desperately wanted a bike. And I would just talk about it all the time. I would think about it all the time. One day, the missionary crate came and there was a bike in it. And I was so excited.
As in like a donated bike.
Like a donated bike.
Okay.
Like someone had said, hey, here's my old bike. Send this off to those missionaries.
And did you have to get in line with the other folks
kind
there to
of,
see
yeah.
if you were the lucky one?
You're not fighting over it, but you're kind of all standing there waiting to see what you want to claim. So as soon as I saw the bike, I claimed it, and they pulled it out and handed it to me. And I was super excited for about 3 seconds until I looked down and realized that this darn bike only had 1 pedal. So I was like, shit,
That's just mean.
Okay, so it only has 1 pedal. All right, well, we're going to figure this out. So I tried shoving sticks in the hole. Those would break immediately. One of the guys that worked at the missionary place, he tried to weld on a pole that would kind of go around, and that kept breaking because the surface wasn't weldable. So yeah, eventually I got to the point where I was that close to having a bike, but never had a bike.
And
that sucked.
How has that bike shaped you today?
I think in a big way. I mean, I think I grew up with this mindset of, why don't I have the things that others have? And I want them. And again, that was frustrating for me there, but there nobody else had a bike either. So I didn't really have any context for it other than I wanted a bike and I didn't have a bike. When I got back, I realized, oh crap, everybody else does have bikes and I don't have anything.
I was curious how you had the context of bubble gum out in Papua New Guinea.
Well, I was 7 when I went over, so I knew what bubble gum was.
Okay.
And I had really enjoyed it before I'd gone overseas. But yeah, there's like the basic things that you don't think about that when you're out in the middle of nowhere, I mean, we were up in the middle, literally in the bush.
I mean, it was like camping.
You grew up. We had a house.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, for it was dirt roads to get there.
And this is just your normal. So it wasn't like like you said, you didn't feel like you were a poor kid or whatever. You were just hanging out. You were obviously the minority out there. What did you do for fun?
We played soccer.
Yeah.
So I quickly blended in with the local kids, and I picked up the local dialect really quickly. And we would play soccer almost every day. And that was fun. And we would do all kinds of things. I formed a little band. I think there's a picture of that in the book. Like, yeah, we'd have like a little group of us. Some of them would be banging sticks. I was like drumming on a guitar. I mean, we did basically whatever it was. For me, I didn't really know anything else, because when I'd gotten there, I was a little bit too young to really have had a lot of impressionable experiences that I could remember. And so for me, all I knew was Papua New Guinea.
You moved here back to Arizona then when you were 11?
We moved to Quemado, New Mexico, which is a little tiny town in New Mexico. And that's where I had that first realization part that I was broke and that everybody else had stuff.
And what were your folks doing there?
We had family there that kind of let us crash in one of their spare trailers while we integrated back into the culture. My mom taught at the local school. She taught 5th grade. And I went into 7th grade at that local school. And
so now you are getting re-indoctrinated into the consumption culture of America. Yes. And you're like,
and I was a really sheltered kid, like I remember I got the crap beat out of me that first year. Here I was, this like goody two shoes missionary kid coming in, and the locals didn't really appreciate that very much. And they were all bigger than me because I'd started school earlier. And a lot of times in that community, you sometimes skip a year of school to work on the farm or whatever the case may be. So a lot of the kids were multiple years older than me. But I was also like this just goody two-shoe that was walking around. Jesus wouldn't like you saying that, Park. Don't use that bad word. And they would just pummel me. So I got a rough indoctrination back into America.
I'll say. So they're like, say a few prayers, Jonathan, because here we come, pal.
Good luck to you, pal.
Where did you go to high school then?
So we moved to Arizona when I repeated 7th grade because my parents figured that first 7th grade experience was so traumatic, even though I got straight A's. I was behind. Mm-hmm. My mom got a job in Phoenix at a Christian school, and I went to that Christian school up until to the end of my sophomore year. And then I went to a public high school on the west side of Phoenix called Cortez.
And were you working then too?
Yeah, I always did different odd jobs. I worked, my very first job was, and I remember it to this day, it was actually a really fun job. I worked at Red Lobster and I was a busboy, and it was my first experience in putting money in my pocket. And I thought it was so cool that all I had to do was go like clean up people's tables, and half the time they'd give me free food, and then I'd get this paycheck that I could do whatever I wanted with. In the creation room, one of our rooms here in the office, I have a stack of 5 quarters, and what that represents is $1.25 is what it cost in high school to buy a large French fry, a small French fry, and that was the least expensive thing on the menu was a small French fry, $1.25. So what I would do literally every day, because my parents had no money, is I would go around to all my friends and, in quotations, borrow a quarter from 5 different people every day. I'd go get my small fry. I'd go to the salad bar. I'd pile it with lettuce because you couldn't go take nothing to there. You had to have something. I'd already tried that, and they wouldn't accept that. So then I'd make it basically a fry salad, and that's what I ate every day. So to have money in my pocket was really cool. So I did that. And then I worked at a place called Rally's, which was a burger joint.
You're a pizza delivery dude.
Then I became a pizza delivery dude.
So now you're really living high.
And I was living on the hog. I was making $1,500 to $2,000 a month. And I was living at home with a paid off car. And man, I was rolling in dough.
And what'd your dad say to you?
My dad one day said, you know what? I think you could think about doing something bigger with your life. And I'm like, what do you mean bigger? Like, I'm making $2,000 a month. And he's like, you know what? I think you could, you're really good at arguing. You could be an attorney. And my mind was just blown. And I'm like, an attorney? Because I'm a missionary kid, right? I'd never really thought much bigger other than I wanted to make money. And now I was making money. So why would I ever screw that up? But he was very clear. He said, I think you could do something bigger than that. So that's what started the idea that, wow, if I'm going to do that, then what do I want to do? And where do I want to do it? So I decided, okay, if that's what my dad thinks I could be good at, I'm going to go for that. And fortunately got into UCLA. I think part of it was the story was different.
And did you use your story of the missionary upbringing and saying this guy's different, so we're going to bring him in? Because you had to pay the out-of-state tuition. I mean, a lot more expensive. You didn't have a lot of money did you get a scholarship going in?
No scholarships. I went in early, so I helped establish residency. So I still had to pay at least one or two quarters of out of state because they're in the quarter system.
And why not ASU or U of A? Why did you decide to go over to UCLA?
I really felt like at the time, ASU now is an extraordinary organization. Like Michael Crow's unbelievable. And like top entrepreneurial organization.
Yeah.
But at the time, the perception was a party school. And if I was going to be a delivery driver, I was the best delivery driver. And now if I'm going to be an attorney, I wanted to be the best attorney. And to become a best attorney, I knew I had to go to a serious school. And I'd also had this kind of idea of the California dream that I wanted to chase.
Oh, yeah.
So I applied to the UC system. I applied to 5 different UC schools: Irvine, UCLA, Santa Barbara, Riverside. I don't know if I applied to Berkeley or not, but I got accepted into all of them. And my dream was UCLA. And so my grandpa had always loved UCLA. And so I packed up my stuff. As soon as I was accepted, I packed up my stuff, took a semester off because I was going to a junior college at the time in between. Oh, that was another thing that helped me too, Park, is it's most competitive at big schools freshman year. So I actually wasn't a freshman because I'd gone to Glendale Community College for a year and a half. And I got a straight A's there because it's easy to do.
And nobody was beating you up?
And nobody beat me up there. So I got a straight A's, and then I wrote a good essay that my dad really helped me kind of think through how to write it. And so I was ecstatic to go to UCLA. And my goal was, I'm going to be an attorney.
You can be the best attorney.
I'm going to be the best attorney. So I was a political science major because they said that's the best major for being an attorney. I got straight A's. I only got 1 B+, and that's because there was a class I took. Well, a couple classes I just decided to go pass, no pass, because you could do that with 3 or 4 classes, and a couple were kicking my ass. And I'm like, I'm just going to switch now because this is going to drag my GPA down. But one class, there was this library in the basement of this building that I didn't even know existed. And the only place you could get the research materials for this thing, for this paper that everybody else thought was easy and I thought was the hardest thing I'd ever done, was because I didn't even know there was a library that had the specific content, that the only place they had it was there. So I got a B+ in that class.
So you weren't a part of Fight Club at UCLA, is that it?
No Fight Club.
Okay, they didn't to know where the hidden library was.
I felt so dumb afterwards. Like, are you kidding me? There's a library.
How about a little help here?
Yeah,
huh?
Can somebody tell me that?
Would you?
Goodness.
So what happened because you did not become an attorney?
No. So into my junior year.
You had the drive. You had the smarts.
Mm-hmm.
You were at a great school. Mm-hmm. You got it all teed up, ready to go. What happened?
Yeah. And I mean, and you talk about drive. I mean, I was working full time. I had full-time jobs. I sold everything from cars to ATM machines. You talk about storytelling. I had some crazy experiences I don't even write about in the book. One of them is I worked for this ATM company in downtown LA called Nationwide ATM. And it was started by this South Korean guy who ended up being a crook. But I didn't know that at the time. It was a job and seemed like a cool job. You could make a lot of money selling ATM machines. So I would go around to all the little businesses, all the retailers, and I'd try to get them to accept our ATM machine. And then we'd get a cut and they'd get a cut and whatever. So I'm doing that. I'm like their top guy. I'm running around selling all these things. One day I'm sitting in the office, and some guys walk in, and they don't look like regular guys. I mean, these guys are big, kind of bulky. They look pissed. And literally they start taking all of our furniture out of the office. They yanked the chair out from under me because I didn't want to stand up. So literally I watch as our office gets completely raided, and I'm like, who the hell was that? And they said, "Oh, the owner hasn't paid the those are leased, and he didn't make his payment." So and that was the first story. And then we had a lot of those. And then at the end, I had to like chase the owner. He was in cahoots with the Korean bank that was in the same building we were located in, and so I had to chase the guy, hold him, physically restrain him in the Korean bank, and tell him I wasn't going to let him leave and I was going to call the cops unless he told the lady who was telling me there was no money left to cash my last check, before he fled the country, that if he didn't tell her to pay me, that I was calling the cops. And I had my cell phone out. So he tells her in Korean to like pay my thing, pays him. Then I had everybody else behind me and I go, now pay theirs.
So you actually had held a hostage in a bank
to
get paid. That's like reverse robbing. I like that idea.
Yeah.
That's a great mentality. Okay.
Yeah. I forgot all about that story till we just started talking.
It's not in the book, folks, but you have it here. An Easter egg for you. So did that steer you clear for some reason of going in alone?
End of my junior year, I had my favorite professor pull me aside one day and said, "Jonathan, I don't think you want to be an attorney." And remember, this is the Guy Park that I'm counting on for my, I wanted to go to an Ivy League law school. Like I was serious, and I wanted this guy to write my major recommendation letter. And he was the smartest guy I'd ever met. And I really liked his class. Like he used word pictures, and somebody that uses word pictures to me is the highest form of communication.
Word pictures.
Yeah. Like everything he says it in a way where you can visualize it, and he just layers them. And so
storytelling,
you storytelling, you can't not remember his class. I didn't even need to take notes in his class because everything was so masterfully worded. So I took every one of his classes. So anyway, so it's this guy. It wasn't just some random professor. And he pulls me aside and he says, "I don't think you should be an attorney." And I'm like, "What do you mean? There's my whole life's work leading to this." And he said, "I think that you should do something more entrepreneurial and people-oriented." Well, at the time, I didn't even know what entrepreneurial meant, right? That didn't carry any weight for me. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, do something where, you get to interact with people more than sit behind a desk, because that's really what attorneys do and study books." And I'm like, okay. So I go to this job fair and I have a resume. Now I had a pretty good looking resume because I had straight A's and I had work experience, and I'd always excelled at everything I'd done. And so, I hand out all these resumes. I get all these letters back. I have no idea what they mean. Like, I don't know what Deloitte does. I had no concept of this at the time.
You're pretty rudderless at this point.
Rudderless.
So you went from being completely focused on that law to like, what the hell am I going to do now?
No clue what I'm going to do. And literally there was 50 companies. I could be misstating it. Maybe there was 40, maybe there was 60, but there was about 50 companies at this job fair. I gave every single one of them my resume. Like I didn't even know what they did. I didn't even ask. I just went around and passed it out. And so I get all these letters, and then I'm like, shit, I don't know who all these. So I had this corkboard in my home, and I just pinned them all up there because I didn't know what to do with them, and I didn't have time, and I was busy working.
And what were these letters? They were just say, "Hey,
like, hey, we got your resume. Come in and interview." So I got like 30 letters, and I had no idea what any of them were.
Now you're like, "Oh crap, I got to go."
Now I got to like figure this out. I went to a couple. Like I went to a Deloitte interview, I think, or something like that, and I left that interview going, "I will never be an auditor. That is the opposite of what I want to do." So I had a couple of those, and then a buddy of mine came over and saw the corkboard. He goes, "What's this?" I go, "Oh, I don't know, man. It's all these letters. I don't even know what these companies do." And he yanks one off. He looks through them, plucks one off, hands it to me, and says, "You should do this." And I'm like, "Well, what is it?" He goes, "It's commercial real estate." I go, "What's commercial real estate?" And he goes, "Doesn't matter. You want your own private jet someday?" I'm like, "Me? A private jet? Hell yes, I want a private jet someday." And he said, "You should do this. You'd be really good at it." And so that was like my first. I didn't even know what commercial real estate was. So I picked up the phone and I called this company and I said, "Hey, I'd like to come interview." And it was a company in the warehouse district of LA, and drove 30 minutes down there in my suit and my beat up car. And I walk in the office and I look around and I'm like, "Oh, this is more like it." Like
what was it you liked about it?
Here's what I liked. I loved the fact that there were a bunch of Mercedes and BMWs in the parking lot to begin with. I loved that it was a flashy, nice office space. I loved that when I walked in, there was a bunch of good-looking dudes in suits that looked successful.
Now, do you think that comes from your Papua New Guinea days of having nothing, essentially?
So. Yeah.
And so now you were looking at the exact opposite of the spectrum.
I'm like, this is making it. I want this. And then I go to the people I meet with. I'm sitting at the chair, and I was met with one of their senior people or whatever. And I'm looking at his desk, and he's got this gorgeous wife and this amazing family. And they're like in Telluride or something. And I'm like, I want that life. That's what I want. And so so what do I got to do this? Like, how does this work? And they're like, oh, it's actually, it's not that hard. You just have to work really hard. You have to be good with people. I'm like, well, I'm good with people. I don't mind working hard. I've always worked hard. And they said, and you just got to be willing to have a lot of people tell you no. Everybody always tells me no. That's no problem. And I'm like, so if I just do that stuff, then I can have this? And they're like, yeah. So I was like, that's what I want to do. That was the decision for me, is I wanted in. That was the business that showed me a pathway to a different life. And I had never seen a pathway up until that moment.
Yeah. So you were,
could have been anything at that point. That just happened to be the commercial real estate recommendation.
Yeah.
It could have been stock brokerage. It could have been any of those kinds of high flying things. And I would have been like, yes, I want that.
It's interesting that you were really driven internally about being an attorney. Your dad suggested that in the way you went. So intrinsically, you felt like this is what you wanted. You had a very smart professor saying, actually, Jonathan, I don't think this is the right track for you. And so you went out, found this career, but it was more, it sounds like at first, about what you could have versus who you were.
100%. Had nothing to do with who I was. Everything was about attainment at that point. I'd spent all this time and money. I mean, I put myself through UCLA. My parents didn't have any money to support me, right? So I worked and I took out loans, and that's how I got through UCLA. And so I was extraordinarily, and I got lucky because I also got, one of the jobs I did was I did this unique program that MCI had where I became the top guy in the country.
MCI, the telephone company.
the telephone company, switching people from AT&T. At the time, AT&T was gouging people. So I was switching people right and left from, those are some interesting stories too. I know we don't have time for all that.
You cover
today,
that in the book.
But it's in the book if you want to read more about that. So so I had this mindset of, I'm going to be successful and I'm willing to do what it takes to be successful. So that was where I was coming from. So
you take the job. Who was your first job with?
Well, so here's what happened. So I had met this girl on a fraternity ski trip that lived in Portland, and I fell head over heels for this gal. I mean, she was the prettiest girl I'd ever dated. She was cool and just awesome. And so I decided, you know what? After I graduated, I dated her long distance for a year or two, and I said, I'm going to move up to Portland. And I kind of got tricked because every time I went to Portland, it was nice.
I grew up in Seattle, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
I didn't quite realize what I was getting myself in for. I went up there, and the first year it rained 90 days straight, took one day off, and then rained another 30 days. And I had to buy this thing that I'd never even heard of, which was called a raincoat. And I didn't even know what a raincoat was. I'd seen it in movies, but I didn't know. I'm like, where do you get a raincoat? And so they pointed me, and I go, what color raincoat? And it was the whole thing. And you have to wear this every day?
My wife and kids, I've been married now 32 years. And back when they were little and we were just married and Michelle was really getting introduced to Seattle for the very first time, they would all ask me, like, why did you move from here? And I said, remember, we're visiting in summer. It's a lot different in the Pacific Northwest when it's not summer.
That's it. Well stated. Well stated. So anyway, I decided that, again, like everything else in my overachieving young life, I decided I was going to only go work at the very best firm. So I called all the top 10 firms. I actually had to call one firm 20, I don't want to misspeak, I think 23 times.
In Portland. You're up there now.
Just until they finally succumbed and gave me an interview, because I didn't want to ever say that I
Well, you're running up their AT&T bill.
So exactly right. Yeah. Exactly right. So I interviewed. I decided on Grubb & Ellis because I liked the guy that there was a producer there that I felt I could learn a lot from, that I really liked the best. By this time I'd started to hear some rumors. Rumors is the best I can describe it. Or at least some stories about the ruthlessness of commercial real estate brokerage. But I really still had no concept.
So you're in your first year and you're just starting to get your feet wet.
So I start with Grubb & Ellis, and I realize within that first 6 months, like, okay, I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. And I didn't realize how much of a Shark Tank it was. I thought the people that I was working with were like my buddies. I didn't realize that all of us were scratching and fighting to get to the top of the totem pole to get their picture on the wall as the top producer. I thought we were a team. I didn't realize I was a team of one. But I was like, okay, well, if this is what it takes, remember, I want the BMW, and I want the hot wife, and I want the place in Telluride,
and the private airplane.
I mean, that's in my future.
Absolutely.
So I became ruthless,
and a
man.
bike with 2 pedals.
That's all. I've always just 2 pedals.
A bike with 2 pedals.
Even every time I think about it, it still causes me a little tiny bit of pain. Funny story on that one is, people that have read the book or I've told the story to, about a year ago, I open up the mail and I have a package in the mail, and I open it up and there's a pedal in it. And I go, this is interesting. And I pull the pedal out, and it says, there's this really nice letter from this really nice lady out of Florida who said, Jonathan, I read your book and I was inspired, and I wanted to give you the pedal that you never had. And so today in the creation room, I have that pedal sitting there to remind me of that story. So anyway, I became ruthless, man. And I would do whatever it took. And ruthless took a lot of forms, right? Ruthless as far as trying to listen and overhear conversations inside the company to see who might be talking to somebody. I could figure out who it is and go try to steal it, to recommending things to clients that were not necessarily in their best interest, like long-term leases with no flexibility, or, not pushing too hard on rental rates because
you wanted that
because
commission.
I wanted the commission.
Yeah.
And on and on and on. And
were you kissing up to guys in there, acting like their buddies, and just to try to get their
pick
scoop?
brains. The worst,
they were doing it to you, so
they were doing it to me, and I was doing it to them. Now, again, I'm an overachiever, so I became the worst of the worst. And I remember one time a senior guy that took me under his wing. I'm still embarrassed of the story to this day, to be honest. I feel like sheepish.
You did just turn a little bit red.
I did. Yeah.
Just a little.
I can't believe I used to be this prick, man. I used to be so bad. So there was a guy that had a listing on a building. And so I went to him, and I pretended to be his buddy, bought him some drinks, and got all the inside skinny and all that was wrong with the building. And then I went to the building and I started talking to all the tenants and trying to convince them to leave, using the insider information from the listing guy that had told me that in confidence over drinks. And that is not like an unusual story. Like that's the industry. Everybody's smiling. Everybody's super friendly. They got big personalities, but underneath it all, it is a fight. And so I entered the fight, and I entered it to win. And, the other thing about it, that there was a part of me that never could reconcile the whole representing both sides of transactions. Mm-hmm. That one, actually, I could never even get my head around.
You're representing the building owner and the potential tenant
and justifying it somehow. The conflict of interest is so obvious, trying to represent both sides of transactions. And
bigger commission. That's
bigger commission, double dipping. But man, it's but the tenant's just getting raked over the coals. It's like, shut up, Jonathan, just go back to work. I remember one time I had my senior guy took me to this meeting, and I watched the CFO start asking questions about conflict of interest. And I thought he was going to have a bunch of good answers, and he had none. And I just watched him get fired on the spot. And I thought, wow, this conflict of interest stuff is real. But it was just kind of in the back of my head. I always kind of liked the purity of being a tenant broker, but I was in the game, so I wasn't going to get into that. And then,
how many years were you in it when you were doing this? From when you first got in to your aha moment of maybe this isn't the best way to go.
About 5 years. So I'd been in the business about 5 years. I couldn't handle the rain in Portland, so I'd moved down after a year and a half.
So you came down to the big leagues.
Came down to the big leagues in Phoenix, and was not surprised to realize that it was pretty much the same thing here, if not worse.
Yeah.
And kept trying to carve a name for myself. But I mean, the reality, Park, is I had a big grin on the outside, and I was starting to have some success, but I was miserable on the inside.
So you 5 years, real quick, Jonathan, you had to pay your dues, years 1 and 2. When did you really get how to do this and start making some significant money?
Well, I was lucky in the sense that when I worked ridiculously hard, they would track your calls. And so I would try to make 100 outgoing calls a day. And I got lucky too, right? Hard work creates luck. So I created some luck, and I got success faster than a lot of people do when they start in the industry, but not success in a, and I'm talking 100 to 300 grand, not $1 million, $2 million, $10 million, like some of the big dogs. But for me at the time, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I didn't have very many expenses. So, I'm about 5 years in the business.
And one other question.
Sure.
Are we talking 2002 to 7, 8? What year did you get into it?
I got in 1998.
98. Okay.
98. And so this would have been kind of like at the second half of 98 and early 2004 is when the event happened, which was I go to this industry conference in Miami, Florida, and this guy gets up and he starts talking crazy talk. And he starts talking about how you could create success by just helping others. And I'm looking at him thinking, okay, I'm like checking this guy out, eyeballing him up and down, going, okay, this guy looks like a stud. He looks like a badass. And I've heard that he makes $4 to $5 million a year. So he knows what he's talking about. He's got credibility. Yet all he's talking about is how much he helps people. How is this possible?
What's the profit in that?
Where
there's no margin in helping people.
I know what it's like to help people. You go broke, man. So I go.
You grew up helping people.
Grew up helping people and making no money doing it. So I go up afterwards and I'm like, hey, all right, give me this great scoop, man. What do you really do? Is this just a shtick that you say to audiences? So,
because it's cool. Disruptive.
Yeah. And he goes, no, this is how I built my business. And I said, really? Tell me more. So he tells me a little bit more. And I go, if this really works, how come nobody else is doing it? And he said, because it takes too long. And I said, what does that mean? He goes, well, Jonathan, most people are out hunting and this is farming. He goes, most people take a gun, get up in the morning, more salespeople, they get up in the morning, grab their gun, go shoot, kill it, eat it, take it back, skin it, and then the next day they get up and do it all over again. This is like planting citrus trees. The first year, second year, third year, fourth year, you're grooming it, you're watering it, you're putting citrus food in the ground and fertilizer, and then you get your first piece of fruit, and it's one and it's small. But over time, you have a massive tree. Like I have a lemon tree in my backyard right now, Park. Mm-hmm. Thing's almost a nuisance. It produces so many lemons. But back in the day, I was like excited about the first one. And he goes, and that's what it's like. You spend all your time helping people. And over time, it's not an instant gratification game, but over time, if you love and serve and help enough people, you create a community that all they want to do is help you back. And I said, is this really possible? And hindsight's always 20/20. So it's hard for me. Sometimes I wish I could go back to that exact moment when I had the epiphany, but for me, it just resonated. It resonated with me. It just rang true. It was, wow, if this could be done, if this is really possible, I want to do it this way.
Well, and did it resonate with you because of your upbringing?
Yeah.
And did your mom and dad, when they saw you become this ruthless guy, and then when you started seeing this selfless service, was it kind of that return of the prodigal son type story?
Big time. But I had sheltered my parents from a lot of it, right? They knew I was having success, but they didn't know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I was not transparent about that. And so they were proud of me, but they didn't know if they had known, they wouldn't have been proud of me. Mm-hmm. And so I came back to Arizona in 2014, threw my old business plan away. He gave me a book called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, who today is one of my friends and one of the people that's helping promote the book for me.
I ordered that book.
It's a good
After
book.
Reading yours, I've got it now.
Book.
It's my next step.
And I got to work helping people. So all I did, people always go, so what exactly did you do? I go, it's almost going to sound too simple. What I did was I stopped setting up sales meetings. I stopped cold calling. I stopped knocking on doors. And I got involved in the business community, attended every event that I could, volunteered to be on every nonprofit and for-profit business board in the community that I could.
And this is 2014.
No, this is 2004.
2004. Four. Okay, thanks.
This is 14, 15 years ago.
Gotcha.
And just asked everybody the same question, Park. How can I help you? what do you need? How can I
Did
be
you
of
think
service?
you were crazy?
No, I'm here. Look, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Never the smartest guy in the room.
Well, except for maybe this exception.
Maybe. But I'm really good at like, I'm a good learner.
Mm-hmm.
So when he gave me the plan for how I like go do this, I worked the plan. So I came back and I just started helping everybody that I could. And at first, I had to even help people understand what I meant by when I said, well, how can I help you?
Now, were you working for a company at this point? And this is just the way you chose to approach your real estate career. Did your bosses think you were nuts? And weren't they like, where's the income, Jonathan?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So no, they didn't think I was nuts because this guy that I learned from had a reputation for being a stud. So there was the association that enabled me to give me a little bit of room, a little bit of runway, but that runway went away quickly, right? That runway dissipated. And so before too long, I was in a situation where they were like, okay, Jonathan, this was all cute and this is great, but there's this thing called revenue and, we kind of need it. And I get that you're on a 5-year plan, but the business has these things called bills and you kind of got to pay them. And so it became progressively harder for me, but I just refused to give up. Like I could just feel it. I could feel that what I was doing was working. And I was so committed to the idea that if I could figure this out, I wanted it, right? So I wanted it at my core even more than I wanted the favor of others. And I think that's I think why a lot of people aren't comfortable with disruptive business models like this is because they want to be part of the club. I didn't care about being part of the club. I was a missionary kid. I'd never been part of the club anyways. I didn't even want to be part of the club. There was like the rebel in me, like, screw you. I'm going to show you. My favorite quote at the time was success is the greatest revenge, right? Like you always told me I'm just a dumb missionary kid that'll never make anything of myself. Watch. I don't have any of that resentment anymore. But at the time it drove me. And so I kept grinding. When I asked, why don't people do this? And they said, it takes too long. And I said, how long is too long? And he said, 4.5 to 5 years. I just had that in my head. And just like he predicted, 4.5 years later, I started getting unsolicited referrals and business started coming to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. Like I'd even started to doubt this actually works. This is amazing.
So 4 to 5 years from when you started this would have put you right in the heart of the recession. Mm-hmm. So while nobody was doing any work or very little, did you see your book of business start growing because people were there from who you helped leading up to that?
Yeah. So think about it like this. A lot of people are afraid of down markets in commercial real estate. I'm not, because what we do is we help the user, we help the tenant, we help the occupier. And when everything's fine and they're printing money and the economy is good, they don't really care that much about could they save an additional 10 to 20 to 30% on their real estate, because they're just about getting the facility open and blowing and going. Well, for me, I'd spent my time helping all these people. Then the market turns and everybody's stressed. They're looking at their real estate obligations going, holy crap, how do I get out of this? Hey, call Jonathan. So I had all this business come in. Like I actually like down markets. I'm not trying to create it. I don't want a down market, but I'm just saying like down markets create opportunities for people that are in a business of helping people when they have a need. And that's what it did. So that was a catalyst. So I had record years in those down markets because of the fact that I'd spent my time planting those seeds of service in the up market. And it just took off from there. And it was literally like, and at that point, Park, my commitment to myself was, wow, this works. I need to figure out how to scale this. And I need to not get away from my core. And my core was service. So I did a bunch of crazy things. For example, it's kind of crazy to be in Phoenix, Arizona and hire a driver, right? But there was a kid who I knew who said he loved driving my car because I had a nice car, and he worked at Starbucks, and I knew he wasn't making that much money. And I was sitting there thinking one day about how I could get more time in my day, and I realized 7 to 8 meetings a day, which is what I was doing, I was spending a third of my time unavailable in the car. And so I went to him one day and I said, hey, would you ever want to drive me around for a job? And he goes, I'd be honored. So I had my buddy Kyle, who was like a quirky and cool dude, but man, that guy was awesome. And he drove me all around town. And And I got so much more
And you
time.
were sitting in the back
sitting
making
in the
phone
back
calls.
making phone calls. I had Wi-Fi in my car, so I was just cranking on my laptop. Him and I had a system. I even had him helping me like eat right. So he'd be like, timer would go off. He'd be like, eat this. Like we had such a system. It was amazing. But it was all about scale. It was all about how much can I cram in at the height of that phase. Before I started my own firm, I was doing 50 acts of service a day. So if you just think about that.
And what's an act of service?
An act of service is everything from, because people would answer that question many different ways. So I'd say, what do you need? They'd say, well, I really need more business for my firm. Okay, what does your firm do? And then I'd go and figure out all the people that might be good business people for him, and I'd make introductions. He'd be like, are you kidding me? I'm like, yeah, of course. This is what I do is I help people. And he'd be like, what do you want in return? You want a commission? I go, no. Just this is what I do. If you ever know anybody in commercial real estate that needs help, let me know. But I'm happy to help. And then other people, I'd help their kids get jobs. We'd help help them find doctors. I became like the concierge of the community just by doing it. I didn't have a title or anything, but people started going, if you need anything, call Jonathan, because he's crazy enough just to help you with whatever you need.
He'll drop everything and get on it.
He'll get on it, and he asks for nothing. Use that free resource. But what it started was this momentum of people saying, I became the go-to guy. And then they all knew that I did commercial real estate, but I wouldn't ask. I would just serve. And so now my business is skyrocketing. I went from laughing stock in my company to top producer, which created its own set of problems, right?
And you're talking 2010, 11, 12 time frame?
Yeah. This was 2009 to 2012 was this run. Mm-hmm. And it was getting harder and harder for me to keep up because we had so much business. I didn't know what to do with myself. And I couldn't hire people fast enough. Part of it was cultural challenges at my old firm.
And you were doing all these acts of kindness.
Totally.
So you had like two lives happening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How'd you have time for your family?
Yeah. The family suffered. It was my ex-wife did not get the best of me. Mm-hmm. Now, I did my best, right? But I was always on. I was always focused. I was like a dog with a bone. Like I was so tired of being poor. And I'd already had a couple cycles. When 9/11 happened, I was just starting to make it. And then all the business fell out from under me. And like, that was brutal. So I had this I call it the Kobe chin, where Kobe Bryant in the finals stuck out his chin ferociously and forced the win a few years ago, whatever that was. And that's what I always think about. That's what I was like. I was like willpower alone. So I had an imbalanced life. I was stressed out all the time. I was looking over my shoulder.
Even while
I was doing it, because I was in the wrong culture, right? And I was still feeling like I'm trying to be this way, but I'm also getting dragged back into this cutthroat way of doing business, because if I wasn't doing it, then I had to...
The commercial real estate vacuum. Yeah, you were just being sucked back into it as you were trying to be disruptive and go in a different direction.
Yep. So the big shift, it was June of 2012. And for all those listeners who have ever been to Sedona is a special place. It's got a peace and a calm about it. And I've been a lot of places. I've never been anywhere that's as peaceful. I just feel more peaceful when I'm there. So I was like stressed out. Took my wife up there. I get up early in the morning. She's sleeping in. I go down to the spa. It's like super early. Nobody's up. I get in the hot tub. It's like one of those idyllic setting parks. You could just see it. Like I'm in the hot tub surrounded by the most amazing mountain range.
The Red Rocks of Sedona. And for those that aren't familiar with it, it's north of Phoenix. It's about an hour and 40 minutes roughly. And you do climb into this canyon that's just unbelievable.
And this was a private canyon. It's called Enchantment Resort.
Oh, yeah.
Down in the spa. And it looks fake. It's so beautiful. And then on top of it all, now all of a sudden there's this really gentle snowflakes on my head. I'm sitting in the spa, sitting in the hot tub. And I'm just being quiet, and I'm just meditating, and I'm just thinking, and I'm just frustrated, trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Because this is not going to work for long. And all of a sudden it just hits me. And I have this epiphany. And I realize in that moment that I've been thinking way too small. And that what I'm up to is bigger than me. And that it's bigger than my little team. And that if I could actually teach other people what I've learned, and eliminate the 5 years of scarcity to get there, that I could actually transform what I believe to be one of the most ruthless cutthroat industries in the world. And my first instant thought, Park, was, I don't want to do that. I'm just a commercial real estate broker, you know? And the thought that instantly hit me after that was, if not you, then who? And I realized in that moment that all of these crazy things in my life that I had resented were actually ideal preparation for the challenge that I felt myself being called to do in that moment. And I started to get really excited. And then I thought, well, let's see, there's a lot of other industries. So maybe I could help change the way that business is done. And maybe any industry that's cutthroat could utilize these principles for success. And I got super excited. And so I grabbed my iPad that was sitting there. I started scribbling on it all the things that I hated, because I thought, okay, so if I'm going to start a firm, what would I make it like? And so I started writing down all the things I hated about commercial real estate brokerage. And it was a long list. And then I said, okay, what would I like it to be? What's an ideal world? And I just closed my eyes and started thinking and brainstorming, started writing down all the things that I wish were true. And out of that, we created Kaiser's 15 core operating principles that we built the firm on. So anyway, so I ran up, woke my wife up, and I said, I figured it out, what we're going to do. I finally get it. And literally in that moment, for many years, you asked about kind of how my parents viewed me. Because of the fact that my family was always in Christian service, Park, I always had this mindset that the only thing that really is success, because that was pounded in my head, don't worry about money. It's all about doing things for eternity, for the future, for God, right? And I had rejected wholesale all of that. I wanted nothing to do with that. I'm like, screw that. I want to take care of me. But in that moment, there was this sort of recognition that wow, my parents have been right all along. Like they just didn't monetize it. And I'm going to show that it's possible to actually be the selfless people that my parents and family are without all the religious stuff, because I believe the principles work and teach other people how to do that. And that's where the idea of the Kaiser Institute came, was not just am I going to go model it, not just am I going to go create a firm that does business this way, but I'm going to start teaching and training and empowering and certifying other leaders who want to have extraordinary success, who would love the idea of success through service, but don't see a path forward, don't know how to get from A to Z. And it's not easy, right? It's relatively simplistic in its idea, like many things.
It's a
right?
lot of effort.
But it's a lot of effort, and you have to be strategic about it. It's not just standing out on the corner and saying, who needs help? You have to be very thoughtful and strategic.
Did you ever have a time you came up and had that epiphany, told your wife, came back to Phoenix? Did you ever have that day where you're like, what the hell was I thinking? I was just caught up in the moment.
No, never. I have had a definitive sense of purpose ever since that moment, and I believe it is my mission to change the business world. Everything that we do here, so I went back to my partners, told them, hey, I'm going to leave. I'm going to start my own firm. They all kind of laughed at me. Good luck with that. We decided that we were going to put all of who we really were out there fearlessly, because, come on. We're in commercial real estate, right? Going out and talking about love and service isn't exactly the norm. And there were a lot of people that ridiculed us.
Oh, there have been a lot of eye rollers.
I remember it distinctly, Park. We were so fortunate. I was ready to work just out of a Paradise Bakery, now Panera. I was ready just to work out of that until we had made enough revenue to get our own office space. But a very kind firm, a architecture firm, friend of ours, had some extra space in their back, and they let us crash at their office. So I remember it's like first month, we haven't launched our site yet. And I'm about to hit send on go live to the web developer. And I think in my head, this thought, you know what? I better read this through one more time.
The website
from start to finish, word after word, thinking, what would other brokers think when they read this? And so I read it from the perspective of I'm at the big firms and I'm looking at this silly Jonathan Kaiser guy telling this crazy story. And I remember reading through that whole site and cringing a bunch of times, thinking from that perspective. And at the end, I go, dude, we are going to get laughed and mocked and people are going to think we're crazy. Screw it. That's who we are. Send. Right. And that was that defining moment. It's like, yes, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. At the time, I thought we would appeal to probably 20% of the market. I thought 80% would think we were nuts and maybe 20% would think we were onto something. And what's been the most extraordinary thing is it's actually about 80%. It's the opposite. It's about really? 80% of people, when they hear our story, whether they read the book or they come to Kaiser and they experience it, they say, wow, this is amazing. Like, how do we do this in our industry? Which was further evidence that we needed to do the Kaiser Institute. But I had some unbelievable founders who were all in, right? Blake, Clint, Darius, Ian, Ray. Oh, it was.
And you opened Kaiser in 2013?
2013, January of 2013.
So that is a commercial real estate entity here.
Yeah.
The Institute is still being created, but you actually had the idea of the Institute. I didn't realize that. I didn't get that before your firm here. And now you're one of the largest commercial real estate enterprises in Arizona.
For what we do by headcount, we're the largest firm of our kind in the state. And we're really starting to expand right now. So,
and are you growing nationally? Some other markets?
Yeah, we just launched a very, very small office in New York City, but I'm bringing on a president and chief growth officer. That's just a holder title because at Kaiser we don't have any titles.
Yeah.
We don't believe in titles. But that's the role, is bringing on somebody like that knows how to operationally scale what we're doing, right? And so the idea is to have Kaiser in every major market, to be a $1 billion firm that completely reinvents and re-envisions what commercial real estate could be like and demonstrates definitively that success through selfless service is actually possible and that you actually can create extraordinary success by helping others. Now, that is an extraordinarily big goal. I remember before we had office space, we were going to be working out of Paradise Bakery, that I was telling people this. And they're like, Jonathan, you don't even have an office and you're saying you're going to be $1 billion company. But if you think about it, that's how all great things start, right? The power of an idea. And this is an idea whose time has come. There is no other book like mine on the market. And I don't even say that with ego. I'm saying literally no one would be crazy enough to release a book like this.
Well, the first book you wrote, Disruptive, beautiful. It was self-published just to help people, to explain to people.
It was internal.
Of the user guide. Here's the user guide of being successful at selfless service. Now, your new book that just is coming out this week, airing on the show, is You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win.
That's right.
And it covers all the principles you've learned. And are these the same principles that you learned back in Miami or Florida or is it how you took those and have created it in your own form?
Yes. So great question. So the structure of the book is I tell my story, short version, because I want people to understand that I'm sincere and that I really did this. I'm not a talking head, right? I'm not on a pulpit somewhere pontificating about how this is possible. I'm actually living it, doing it. I'm a founder of an organization that has, payroll and has, expenses.
How many folks do you have?
We have about 50 today.
50 today.
Yeah. And so what this is all about is about demonstrating that you can actually create success even in some of the most ruthless industries in the world just by helping others succeed. And at its core, that's what we're about. So here we are in 2019, gone from nobody laughingstock to the largest of our type in the state, one of the fastest growing companies of our kind in the country. We're actually one of the larger independent firms of our kind in the country with really big aspirations. Institute that's launching, a book that's launching, and our book is designed to walk people through the story, explain the path, and then actually give them everything they need on how they could create a culture of service for themselves. And so the 15 principles are walking people through, because people always say, how did you do this? So I say, well, it's not a simple X or Y answer. It's a combination of things that we've done to create and sustain this extraordinary culture of love and service that we have here. An island, an oasis within the middle of everything that is not.
And you've done something really interesting with the book too, your website, ruthlessbook.com, where as you go through the book, you have all kinds of additional tools there so that people can pull those out and enact them in their business.
Yeah, for anybody that would like to, and go to ruthlessbook.com, and I have a free reinvention roadmap. So one of the things I talk about is for people to actually be able to do this effectively, Park, it's a reinvention process, right? This book has been thought through. If you really want to go from where you're at to success through service, it's a reinvention.
You have to tell yourself a completely new story, do you not?
You 100% do, right? And so we call it a reinvention from the inside out. Self, company culture, and then your community. And so we teach how we do that in every one of the chapters. We talk about how we do it in each of those categories. And so what it creates is it creates a model for people to pick up the book, download the free Selfless Roadmap. And sure, there'll be lots of courses, workshops, online training within the Kaiser Institute. You can go to kaiserinstitute.com and learn more. But all that is supplemental. If you just want one book, it's going to tell you how, if you want to do it yourself, create a selfless culture, pick up You Don't Have to Be Ruthless to Win. And it's designed to be a how-to. I wrote the original book not as a book. I wrote it like we talked about, as an internal manual and for people to kind of know the story that we were interacting with. And one of the pieces of feedback that came back on that was, this is inspirational, but there's no how-to, right? So the new book is very prescriptive. Here's exactly how you do it. Here's a bunch of examples. Here's other resources. So we want people to feel like they have everything in their grasp when they read my book on how they could go do this for themselves.
By the way, in your book too, you share a number of different books that have helped guide you in this process, two of which I've already downloaded, Never Eat By Yourself. Second one, and I'm going to botch this title, The 17 Things That Are Holding You Back. What's that book?
Steve Chandler.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, 17 lies that are holding you back.
Yeah. 17 lies that are holding you back. So I've got both of them. So
that book was the first one that kind of hit me in the face and set me on this journey of reinvention.
Yeah.
There's so much more in the book that we don't have time for in this podcast.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Where can people find the book? At ruthlessbook.com?
Ruthlessbook.com. It officially goes live August 11th, 2019.
Mm-hmm. And Amazon, I would imagine.
Amazon. I have an Audible version. It's in my own voice.
Oh, well, you're a great storyteller. So
I didn't want to have anybody else reading my book. I thought that just felt weird. Yeah. But yeah, at the end of the day, there's 3 ways to engage with us. Number 1 is buy the book. And if that story resonates with you, we'd love to talk to you. If you'd like us to help create this culture within your organization and you want some tools, we got a bunch of free tools.
And you don't have to be in commercial real estate.
Don't have to be in commercial, any business. That's what the Kaiser Institute is for. We're going to do a lot of commercial real estate work as well, but it's designed for anybody. And we have, on the ruthlessbook.com, we have tons of free resources. Go there, download some of the stuff, sign up for some free classes, etc. And then for anybody who is in commercial real estate and is sick and tired of being sick and tired and just wishes there was a better way. That's how I felt. I felt trapped.
You are their missionary.
I'm their missionary, man. And so if you feel like you'd like to be part of a different culture, we're looking to grow nationally, and call me and let's have a conversation and maybe building something around you if you're aligned around this. And then lastly, if you're a business leader or you're in a company that has real estate, right? Most people have not experienced what it's like to really have a true strategic partner in commercial real estate.
Someone who's actually on your side.
Actually on your side, who actually goes above and beyond. So call us and we can help you there. But really my mission is I want to change the world, Park. I want to be known. I want my legacy to be that you really don't have to behave ruthlessly, even when everybody else around you is, right? That you don't have to do that. And that if you have actually a roadmap for how you can not go broke like my parents, but become successful by helping others succeed. If actually in the future, like I dream of a world, I envision a world where the most talented and bright individuals in the world understand that the best way they could create extraordinary business success for themselves is by helping others. Imagine that world where everybody's trying to out-help each other. I can see it. I have that vision clearly in this day and age. Especially in this day and age. In an age of disengagement. So for me, that's what I'm about. That's what our mission at Kaiser is all about. That's what we live. That's what we teach. That's what we coach. That's how we serve. And if even one person listening to your very well listened to podcast, if this resonates with them and they go implement even a little bit of this in their organization, I would consider myself a success.
Jonathan, thank you so much. What a great time today sitting down. And I love to now have had you for an hour to hear your entire story coming straight from you. Great having you.
It's my honor. Thanks for having me on, Park.
Thank you all for listening to this edition of The Business of Story. Get the book. It's a quick read, and it's also one of those that you can highlight and skim through. It's kind of like its own user's manual. Plus, the website, ruthlessbook.com, has amazing content there waiting for you. And if you liked what you heard here, and you've got a friend, family member, colleague, someone who would benefit from Jonathan's knowledge, share this episode with them. Share the book with them. You might be doing them a huge favor, a huge blessing, and you don't even realize it through that simple act. And of course, if I can be of service to you, you know where to find me, businessofstory.com, to help you excel through the stories you tell. Please come back next Monday when we will have another amazing story artist here like Jonathan. And until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.